There is a trench running across the back of my yard. It is about a foot deep and 2 feet wide, and it follows the slope of the land exactly. Not downhill, not uphill, perfectly level across the face of the slope, like a line drawn by someone who understood something about water that I did not. I did not dig it. The family that owned this property before me dug it, and the family before them. I do not know how far back it goes. What I know is that when my neighbors are out there in July, dragging hoses across brown grass, and watching their water bills climb past $150 a month, my yard looks like it just rained. It did not just rain. It has not rained in 11 days. My name is Mr. Hope, and I want to tell you about the summer I figured out what that trench was for, because it changed the way I look at every yard, every slope, every downspout I have ever walked past since. I grew up thinking about water the same way most people do. You turn on the tap and it comes out. You run the sprinkler and the grass stays green. You pay the bill at the end of the month and you move on. I did not think about where the water went when it rained. I did not think about what happened to the water that fell on my roof and disappeared into the gutter. I did not think about any of it. Then we had a dry summer. I mean a genuinely brutal stretch. 6 weeks with almost no rain, temperatures in the 90s for days at a time, and a water bill that came in at $182 in August. I remember standing in the yard looking at that number on my phone, and looking at the brown patches spreading across the grass, and feeling like I was losing a fight I had not signed up for. My neighbor across the road had no irrigation system. She was not running sprinklers. Her yard was not brown. I asked her about it, and she said something that I did not understand at the time. She said the yard waters itself. I thought she was being modest or vague. She was not. She was describing something real that I had to spend the next several months researching before I fully understood what she meant. What she had was an Amish water harvesting system, not installed by the Amish, but designed on exactly the same principles that Amish farming communities in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and Holmes County, Ohio, have been using for 200 years to manage water on their land, without municipal connections, without pumps, and without bills. And I am going to show you exactly what it is, how it works, and how you can build the core of it this weekend, with nothing but a shovel, and an understanding of how water actually moves through a landscape. But first I need to tell you something that should genuinely make you angry, because I think you deserve to know why nobody has ever explained this to you before. The average American household pays somewhere between $400 and $800 a year just for the water they use outside. Irrigation, garden watering, lawn maintenance, all of it metered, all of it billed, all of it flowing through an infrastructure that was built in the last century, and that the utilities operating it have a direct financial interest in keeping you dependent on. The knowledge that rain falling on your own property can supply most or all of your outdoor water needs with no pump, no filter, no bill, has been documented in agricultural research for decades. It is practiced in over 60 countries. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has published guides on it since the 1990s. Your county extension office has probably never mentioned it. Your landscaper has never mentioned it. The irrigation system installer who quoted you $4,000 last spring definitely did not mention it. Because a yard that waters itself from harvested rain is a yard that does not need their services. A property owner who understands how to manage water passively in the landscape is not buying municipal water for their garden, not calling the irrigation repair company, not adding to the 40% of residential water use that goes to outdoor irrigation in this country. That 40% is not a small number to the people collecting it. Here is what nobody told you, and it is the thing that changes how you see your own property the moment you understand it. When rain falls on a typical suburban yard, most of it leaves. It runs off the grass, down the driveway, into the street gutter, into the storm drain, and away. On a yard with compacted soil and sloped surfaces, 60 to 70% of rainfall can leave the property as runoff without ever soaking in. Of the 30 to 40% that does soak in, most of it evaporates within 48 hours. The rain that just fell on your yard, the rain you watched come down for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, most of it is already gone. Your soil got maybe a day's worth of moisture out of it before the sun took it back. Now here is what the Amish figured out, not from a textbook, but from generations of watching what happens to water on a slope. Water that is moving is water that is leaving your property. Water that is stopped is water that is soaking in. Your job is not to irrigate. Your job is to slow the water down. That is the whole system. Everything I am going to describe is a way of slowing water down, spreading it across the landscape, giving it time to sink into the ground, and storing it in the soil itself, where plant roots can reach it for weeks after the rain has stopped. The Amish call it reading the land. I call it the most useful thing I have ever learned about a piece of ground. Let me show you what it looks like in practice. That trench in my backyard, the one I did not understand for the first 3 years I lived here. It is called a swale, and it is the single most powerful water harvesting tool I have ever seen described in terms of what it does for a piece of ground. A swale is a shallow trench dug on contour. On contour means perfectly level, not slanted down the slope, not slanted across it, exactly level, following the line of equal elevation across the face of the hill, the way the rings on a topographic map follow the contours of the land. Here is why that matters. When rain falls and runs down the slope toward a level trench, it enters the trench and has nowhere to go. The trench is level. There is no outlet. The water pools. And as it pools, it slows down, and it starts to soak in along the entire length of the trench, instead of continuing downhill and off your property. Imagine every rainstorm you have ever watched running off your lawn. All that water moving downhill, following the fastest path it can find, leaving your property in minutes. Now imagine a line running across that slope that catches every drop of that moving water and holds it in place until the ground absorbs it. That is a swale. That is what was in my backyard. That is why my neighbor's yard was green in the middle of a 6-week drought. The water that fell during the last rain was still in the ground, held in the soil at depth, below the reach of surface evaporation, available to the roots of the grass and the trees and the garden plants for weeks after it fell. Not because anyone irrigated, because the design of the landscape held it there. The soil beneath a mature swale system feels different from regular soil. If you have ever put your hand into the earth in an old Amish garden bed, you know what I mean. That soft give, that sponginess, the feeling that something alive is happening underneath. That is what high moisture, high organic matter, high biological activity soil feels like. And it is what the soil alongside a properly functioning swale develops over time, as it receives and holds water, season after season. Building a swale takes about 2 hours for a 20-foot run on a typical suburban slope. You need one tool besides the shovel, and that is a way to find level. The easiest way is a long board with a standard bubble level on top. Hold one end at your starting point, walk along the slope holding the other end, and adjust your position up or down the hill until the bubble is centered. That point is at exactly the same elevation as your starting point. Mark it. Move along and repeat until you have mapped the contour line across your slope. Then you dig along that line, 1 foot deep, 2 feet wide. The soil that comes out goes on the downhill side of the trench, forming a low berm. That berm is important. You plant it immediately. Deep-rooted plants. Fruit trees are ideal. Berry bushes work. Comfrey, which is a deep-rooted herb with enormous leaves, is what a lot of Amish farmers use on the berms of their swales because it grows fast. Its deep taproot breaks up the subsoil, and its leaves can be cut and dropped as a mulch that feeds the soil biology. You plant the berm immediately because plant roots are what hold it in place and prevent it from washing back into the trench during heavy rain. That is the whole construction. Trench on contour, berm on the downhill side, plants on the berm. Done. The first rain that comes after you build it, go outside and watch what happens. Watch the water run down your slope and enter the swale. Watch it pool and slow. Watch the berm holding it back on the downhill side. You are watching water that would have left your property in 5 minutes stop and begin to sink into the ground instead. If you have a slope that is 30 feet wide, a single swale across that slope can hold several hundred gallons of water from a single moderate rainfall event. Water that is now in your soil instead of in the storm drain. Now I want to show you what happens above the swale on the slope, because this is the piece that most people who have heard of swales miss entirely. The Amish do not build one swale. They build multiple swales at different elevations on the slope, stacked above each other like terraces. Each swale catches the water that overflows from the one above it. On a mature landscape with 3 or 4 swales on a slope, there is almost nowhere for rain to go except into the ground. It enters the first swale. If that swale fills and overflows, the excess runs to the next swale down. It overflows to the next. By the time rain reaches the bottom of the slope, it has been slowed and absorbed at every level of the terrain. A landscape designed this way does not send runoff off the property. A landscape designed this way is a sponge. After a significant rain, the soil is saturated to a depth of several feet. During a dry stretch, that deep moisture is what keeps the surface from cracking and the plants from stressing. The Amish farms I have researched in Lancaster County that have had this kind of infrastructure for decades show soil moisture levels during summer droughts that are measurably different from the surrounding land. The farms have different microclimates. They are perceptibly cooler on a hot day because the soil moisture creates a different temperature dynamic at the surface. The difference is visible from the road, green in August when everything around them is brown. Let me tell you about the roof now, because this is the piece that surprised me most when I started actually calculating the numbers. The roof of the average American home sheds somewhere between 45,000 and 90,000 gallons of water per year, depending on the size of the roof and the local rainfall. Right now, nearly all of that water is going into your gutters, down your downspouts, and either into a drainage system or onto the ground at the foundation of your house, where it causes problems. 45,000 to 90,000 gallons per year, hitting your roof, collected by your gutters, and sent away. If 1 inch of rain hits a 1,500 square foot roof, that event alone produces roughly 900 gallons of water. A 3,000 square foot roof produces 1,800 gallons from 1 inch of rain. If your area receives 40 inches of rain per year, your roof is shedding between 36,000 and 72,000 gallons annually. The Amish redirect every drop of that. In a traditional Amish homestead, the downspouts do not connect to drainage pipes. They connect to a series of tanks, earthen ponds, and infiltration areas that distribute the collected roof water across the property. The simplest version of this is what I did with the downspout on the back corner of my house, after I understood what I was looking at. I disconnected it from the downspout extension that was directing the water away from the foundation, and I directed it instead into a mulched infiltration area, a shallow depression about 6 feet across filled with wood chips, positioned uphill from my garden beds. When it rains now, that corner of the roof sheds its water into the wood chip basin. The wood chips absorb it. It infiltrates slowly into the soil below. The garden beds downhill receive the benefit of that moisture, moving through the soil toward them for days after the rain stops. That one change. 15 minutes with a hacksaw and a length of flexible downspout extension. $0. And the corner of my garden that downspout feeds is the most consistently productive part of my entire growing space, because it never dries out the way the rest of the garden can in a dry stretch. Now here's the part that should change how you think about the expense objection, because I know what is coming. The same thing that came up in every conversation I have had about this, and in every comment section on every video about water harvesting I have ever watched. People say this is not really free. You have to dig the swale. You have to redirect the downspout. You have to plant the berm. That is labor. That is time. Yes, it is. A swale takes an afternoon. The downspout redirect takes 15 minutes. The berm planting takes an hour. After that it is free. Permanently. Forever. The swale does not need to be rebuilt. It does not need to be maintained except to occasionally clear any debris that collects in it. It does not require electricity. It does not have moving parts. It does not need a service call. It improves with age as the soil biology around it develops and the berm plantings mature and their roots go deeper. The water company will charge you for outdoor water every single year for the rest of the time you own your property. The swale charges you once and then never again. My neighbor, who has had her system for 12 years, told me she watered her garden by hand once last summer. Once. During a stretch of almost no rain in July, when even her swale system's reserves were getting thin. Every other week of the growing season, her garden took care of itself from what was in the ground. One afternoon of digging versus a $150 water bill every August for the next 20 years. I know which one I chose. I want to give you something specific and actionable before I close, because that is the point of all of this. This weekend, I want you to do one thing. Go outside the next time it rains, or right after a significant rain, and walk the boundaries of your property. Watch where the water moves. Watch where it runs off. Watch where it pools and where it wants to sit and soak in. Draw a rough map. Mark the slopes. Mark the low spots. Mark where the runoff leaves the property. That map is your swale design. Every trench you will ever dig goes where the water is already moving. You are not fighting the land. You are reading it and responding to what it shows you. Then, pick the slope on your property where the most runoff is currently leaving. Find the contour line across that slope with a board and a level. Dig one swale. Pile the soil on the downhill side. Plant the berm with anything deep-rooted you have available. That is it. That is the first step of a system that will still be working on that piece of ground in 50 years. The Amish did not build their water systems in a day. They built them one observation at a time, one season at a time, passed the knowledge from parents to children, and the farms that have had this infrastructure for generations are the farms that are green in August, when everything around them is burning up. You are starting now. One swale this season, another next season if you want. The knowledge compounds the same way the water does. Every rainstorm becomes more valuable. Every dry stretch becomes less frightening. The land learns to hold what falls on it, and over time, that becomes the most reliable water supply you will ever have. Because it costs nothing. Because it never breaks. Because it is already falling on your roof. Tell me in the comments where you live and what your summers look like. Tell me if you have a slope on your property that is currently sending water off into the street every time it rains. I read every one of these. I want to know what you are working with. The people who built this knowledge did not have the option of calling the water company. They had to make what fell from the sky work for them. And they got so good at it that their land stayed green through droughts that broke everyone around them. That knowledge did not disappear. It is still working in the ground of every Amish farm that was laid out the right way. Now it can work in yours. Before I let you go, I want to address the one objection I know is sitting in your mind right now, because it sat in mine too the first time I heard all of this. You were thinking about drought. You were thinking about what happens when it genuinely does not rain for 6 weeks, and the swales have dried out, and there is nothing left in the soil. You are wondering whether a passive system built on rainfall can really carry a yard and a garden through the kind of summer that has been getting more common every year in more parts of this country. I want to answer that honestly. A first-year swale will carry your landscape through a 10-day dry stretch, noticeably better than an unmodified yard. Not perfectly, noticeably. You will water less, the plants will stay healthier longer, but a genuine 3-week drought in the first season will still stress the garden. A 3-year swale system with established berm plantings, their roots now going 2 and 3 feet down into the moisture zone the swale has been recharging through multiple wet seasons. A 3-year system handles a 3-week drought without requiring supplemental water in most climates. A 10-year system does not even sweat it. The Amish farms I have read about in Lancaster County that have had this infrastructure for multiple generations have soil that holds moisture at a depth that the surrounding land simply does not reach. That deep moisture does not evaporate. It is not accessible to the surface soils drying out. It is down there, cool, available, being drawn up slowly by the roots of the mature plantings that have had years to go find it. That is not something you build in a weekend. It is something you build over seasons, but you build it by starting. One swale this summer, one berm planted, one downspout redirected. The system starts working the first time it rains after you dig that trench. It keeps working every rain after that. Year 1, it handles 10 days. Year 3, it handles 3 weeks. Year 10, your neighbor is asking you why your yard still looks like that in August. The answer is the same one my neighbor gave me when I asked her that question standing in her green yard in the middle of a 6-week drought. The yard waters itself. She was right. I just did not understand it yet.